Another nice thing about being a home cook is I can use the same tasting spoon the whole time.
Okay.
Everybody, welcome back to North and South. Today I thought I'd do another cooking video because I promised that I would do more of those, and because I wanted to kind of share what I have learned over the last probably 2 decades about making spaghetti sauce. Now, when I say spaghetti sauce, that in the United States, a lot of the times, that just means a tomato-based sauce that we often eat with any type of pasta, not necessarily spaghetti. I know there's different names for it around the world, and so that's what I mean when I say spaghetti sauce. And I am not going to give measurements or anything along those lines because I make a lot of spaghetti sauce when I make it. In part because I have 9 kids and we often have friends over when I'm making these sorts of things, but also because I like to put some away and either put it in the fridge or put it in the freezer so that on a date night or when the kids want some easy meal for lunch or dinner, they can just pull that out and make some pasta and throw it all together. I also wanted to just kind of teach the general principles of how I make my sauce, because one of the joys of being a home cook or a home chef versus a professional one is that I don't ever have to make anything the same way twice. If you were to work professionally as a chef or a cook, you would want to get your recipes down to be like the same every time so people can count on them in that sort of setting. But at home, you can just learn the principles of how to do things and then change them up every time based on what you've got in your fridge or what's in season or just what you feel like. And so I really enjoy doing that, and I've really enjoyed learning just the basics through trial and error, through reading lots of recipes and cookbooks, and through the joy of having YouTube where we can watch other people cook and gather information that way. You may know this, but I think it's always interesting to watch how other people do it. And if you don't know it, I don't want you to be intimidated. Literally the first spaghetti sauce that I ever learned to make was a Martha Stewart recipe, which had I think 3 or 4 ingredients. It had, some garlic, some red pepper flakes, some canned tomatoes, and some olive oil. And it was delicious. And so over the years, I've kind of experimented with adding new things until I've gotten a sauce that I just feel like is killer and a crowd pleaser and a great dinner menu item. So this sauce I use mostly with pasta, just like a regular pasta that we toss it together with. I can't eat pasta. I am gluten-free, as is one of my kids. And so I will throw it together with a spaghetti squash or sometimes with rice or anything along those lines. I also, when I make lasagna, use this sauce, and that's a really good lasagna. Maybe someday I'll show you how I make lasagna because it is different than a lot of the recipes we have here in the United States. So with that being said, let's go over the ingredients. I have them back here. I like to make my spaghetti sauce these days with Italian sausage, in part because it adds such incredible flavor. There's already so many spices and things in the sausage, but also because I want this to be a hearty meal for my family. So I want to add that in. I get the sweet Italian sausage from Costco. Sometimes in the past I had spicy and I would get that, but I actually prefer the sweet Italian because it helps, I can control the heat rather than whatever the sausage puts in. And then I'm going to use some combination of, aromatic vegetables. So I've got onions, celery, carrot. Today I'm adding in bell pepper because I have them. Bell peppers are nice because they add a natural sweetness, and I'm definitely adding in garlic. Sometimes I'm only doing onions and garlic. I do think carrots add a lot, and I think the celery does too. The thing that you want to be really careful with is that you don't want a chunky, I don't mind my tomatoes being chunky in the sauce, but you don't want your other vegetables to be chunky. I've learned through my own mistakes that when you're having spaghetti and you have a big piece of soft onion, it's really not that appetizing. And so make sure that you are dicing these nice and tiny, like centimeter or less size, not necessarily all the way minced, but diced very small, because then you get the really good flavors, and it's not gonna affect the texture or make people feel like there's carrots in this sauce. But absolutely there are carrots in this sauce because they add amazing flavor. So whether you have any of those vegetables or some of those vegetables, you want to add more things like some mushrooms or something along those lines, that is fine. These are just the ones that I usually have in my spaghetti sauce. I'm also going to be adding some whole tomatoes, canned whole tomatoes, some tomato paste, because the concentrated flavor of the tomato paste really kicks up the richness of the sauce. And then I'm going to be using a dry red wine. If you are not a drinker, I'm not a drinker either, and it took me a long time to figure out what a dry red wine is, or what dry wines in general are. They're just wines with less sugar in them, and so they're going to not add too much sweetness or flavor in that way to your dish. Merlot is a dry red wine, so I'm going to use some Merlot, and I'm going to use some heavy cream. This is not a low-calorie food, but it is a delicious one. So you don't have to add the cream if you don't want. It's still delicious, but when I started adding the cream is when it got crazy delicious for everybody who was partaking of it. So let's just go ahead and get started. Remember, I'm using huge proportions of ingredients, and you don't have to use the meat at all. You can go without that. You don't have to use so much of one thing or the other, but I'm just making so much, like I said, so I can put it away and it can be used throughout the week or the next week after that. So let's start cooking. Oh, one more ingredient I forgot, which is super important: olive oil. I use an extra virgin olive oil. I think it adds so much flavor and complexity. You can absolutely do this in a butter or maybe a lighter olive oil if you're not a fan. You could really use any oil, but I think that since we're going with an Italian dish, olive oil is the way to go. Okay, the first thing you want to do is get your sausage ready. Back in the day, when I was first using sausage in a sauce, I would literally squeeze like I was milking a cow, the sausage out of the end. But then one day it hit me that I could just cut the casings and easily pull them out just like that. Maybe you guys already know that, and you might ask why I'm buying it in casings, and that's just because that's what Costco sells. Yeah, absolutely. If you have it in your local market or the brand you like comes already out of casings, you're never put into casings, that's the way to go. I really like Costco's Italian sausage. I also like the brand that I find here locally called Roma, but just choose whichever Italian sausage that you like to build your sauce off of. Okay, sausage is all unpacked and ready to go. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start by sauteing this sausage. We're not going to necessarily cook it all the way through, but one of the things that adds a lot of flavor to your dish is the browning of the sausage. And there are a few things you can do to get in the way of that process. You want this high heat hitting your meat, and when it's high and it hits the meat, it actually changes the chemical compounds in the meat to make them very, very flavorful. But if you overcrowd your pan, you're not going to be able to get that high sear on there, and it's going to end up being more like steamed because there's so much moisture in there because they're too crowded. Another thing you can do is not have a very hot pan when you put it in there, and so it's just going to be kind of a, limp brown. These are all mistakes I have made, by the way. And then the third thing that you can do to get in the way of that is to turn over your meat too quickly. You don't give it long enough to develop a really caramelized brown on it. It's a little bit more than you think. It's not just trying to get it slightly brown. This is actually trying to develop that caramely color on your meat, and then you're gonna flip it. A tool I highly recommend you get, makes your life so much easier, is this one. It's not expensive, but it's got this nice sharp edge on the bottom, and so that you can get your meat really into small enough pieces that you're not having, you can do it any size you want. So you could have larger chunks if you wanted that. But I like mine to be smaller, especially when I'm making lasagna, because you want it to be nice and smooth. And so you're gonna do that. This also helps because I'm gonna be putting in these whole tomatoes, and this will help break those down, and I won't have to use an immersion blender or anything along those lines. This is great. I think I picked it up at the grocery store. Sorry, my cat's in the background making noise. You'll have to ignore that. First, we're gonna start by, we get our pan nice and warm, we put in some olive oil, let that heat up, and then we're gonna put in, remember, not too many sausages because we don't wanna overcrowd it. So this amount is probably gonna take 3, maybe 4 batches. You're also gonna want a slotted spoon so that you can take the meat out once it's nice and caramelized and brown and set it aside. It won't be, you don't need to worry about all of the pink being gone. You just want to get that nice caramelized color, and you even want some of that to be stuck to the pan. You don't want to scrape that off, because that is going to be really important in developing the flavor of your sauce as well. The sauce is rippling in there. It's nice and warm. So let's go ahead and put these in there. That's a good sign. You don't want it on high. When I was a young cook, I always cooked everything on like high because I was impatient. Literally like medium high to high. Most of the time now I cook on medium, and every once in a while I turn the heat up a little bit higher than that. It takes a little bit longer, but those times are really important for creating good food. Okay, I've turned the sausage over. You can see it's got that nice caramelly color on it. I'm gonna cook it a little bit more and then start to use my handy dandy tool to kind of break it apart and get a little bit more seared. Okay, I've broken it up just a little bit and let it sear just a little bit more, and then I'll get it out and do the same with the rest. Looking good. So now I'm going to use my slotted spoon because I don't want to lose that oil that's in there. I want to leave that in there as part of now the oil I will cook the rest of meat and then vegetables in. So we're just going to pull that out. I'm such an impatient cook that I literally have to find something else to do while meat is browning because I just want to get it done. And so I will turn it over or take it out before it's really developed that flavor. So I have to like walk away and go find something else to do, or else I'm not going to last. But it's worth it. And goes the next sausage. You want to hear that sizzle when you're going in there. If you're not hearing it, then the pan is not hot enough. If you're wondering what I'm doing with my hand in here, the more surface area, the more browning that's going to occur. So I'm kind of pushing it, smushing it in really with my knuckles, so I can kind of flatten it out and get more surface area, more heat on that meat. Here's my plate of my mirepoix, or the aromatic vegetables that I'm going to be putting in here. As you can see, they're pretty small. This one's a little too big. Ideally, I like them about this big, including the celery and carrot and pepper. And I did put it on a cute plate, and you might be like, oh, did you just do that for YouTube? Sometimes I just do this for myself. I was hanging out with some moms several months ago, and they were talking about wanting to make recipes where they didn't have to cut up any vegetables. And I was thinking about how I've been in that phase with young kids, and how you're really just trying to figure out, taking care of little kids and their needs, and it's difficult to be doing a lot of those things at the same time. I think what's especially difficult is so many of us are learning to cook at the same time as parenting young children. And I think what a better system it would be, and I think this is how it used to happen, is that if you're planning on being a homemaker and cooking food at home for your family, it would be so great to be trained in the art of doing that before you have kids, so that you go in feeling very comfortable and very confident in those skills. And so it doesn't require so much of you to do those things, because you're learning how to do it while you're doing it, with kids at your feet. How much easier it would be if that's already something you're comfortable doing. And I think back in the day, your moms and your grandmas would teach you a lot of those skills. And I think we kind of shy away from that now. But since so many of us are planning on being homemakers, so many of our daughters still are, I think we need to resurrect that. And I think it's starting to happen, but I am definitely teaching my daughters and making a video like this so that maybe if you haven't had kids yet, or if you have, you can learn those skills and get a lot more comfortable in them. All that to say is, when I'm cutting things up like that, I start early because it becomes kind of a happy, meditative process for me to do, rather than how little do I need to do to make dinner. It becomes an art, a creative pursuit, and something that's very relaxing for me. And so I start well before, the dinner hour, so that I can have that. And you can prep, when your kids are coloring, or when the kids love to watch cooking and prep. So if they want to just put them in a high chair and let them watch you, or standing next to you on a stool, you can do that. Now let me show you what it looks like in here. Look at all of that deliciousness in the pan. That is all so full of flavor. And when we deglaze it and bring it back up into the sauce, it's gonna be amazing. We're gonna go ahead and dump these in. Start cooking them. Now, you guys saw I had a lot of oil in the pan to cook my vegetables in. If you don't, if your sausage or whatever it's pretty dry in there, go ahead and add some more olive oil or whatever cooking oil you're using. The oil is actually really important to the cooking of the vegetable. It's a conductor of heat, and it helps the browning process and the flavor development on the vegetables or on the things that you're cooking. And so if you're roasting something in the oven, you don't want water, you don't want your vegetables to be wet when you are cooking in the pan or in the oven, because then they'll steam, unless that's what you're going for. If you want that really nice browned intense flavor, you want them dry, but you want some oil to conduct the heat and cook them much quicker to get that. So keep that in mind. Now you'll probably also notice that I have another plate with the garlic, and I didn't put it in there because garlic cooks really quickly, and when it overcooks, it gets really bitter. And I have done that so many times, and it tastes really bad and it ruins everything. And so you're gonna add this after everything else is pretty much done, and only for 30 to 60 seconds before you add in your wet ingredients to start the saucy part of the sauce. Okay, the vegetables are looking soft and starting to be translucent. Now I'm just gonna make a space and add the garlic. I like garlic, I add a lot of garlic. Another thing I like to do is roast some garlic and just throw that in at the end, because it's got that just amazing sweetness and depth of flavor. Not only when I'm maybe in the winter when I don't mind just having something else roasting, but I only do it sometimes. This is good too. I decided last minute, I'm also gonna throw in about that much, half a tablespoon of red pepper flakes for a little kick. That's yummy. Cook that at the same time as the garlic for about 60 seconds. You smell it getting aromatic or changing color, getting more golden. Okay, that's good. All right, remember all of that goodness at the bottom of the pan. We're now going to add our red wine, and I am adding a lot because I'm making a lot of sauce. You don't have to use red wine if you don't want to. The tomatoes will also deglaze the pan, but I do like the complexity that the red wine adds. So I'm gonna put this in, and I have a flat-sided wooden spoon, and I'm just gonna stir that around. I'm actually gonna turn the heat up to near high because I wanna burn off a lot of that red wine. We're gonna cook all of the alcohol out. I know that's debatable, but we're gonna cook that down until most of the liquid is gone, and then just tons of flavor. You're just gonna scrape the bottom with your wooden spoon. I do this process so often with gravies and sauces and soups and about anything I'm making. And that is in part why I don't use any non-stick pans. You can't do this to a non-stick pan without scraping it up and damaging it and then leaching the chemicals that are on that non-stick pan into your food. So you want to get stainless steel. You can do it in cast iron. The only thing about cast iron is it can be really hard on your seasoning of the pan, the seal that you've made on your cast iron. And it can also bring out some of the flavors that are naturally in your cast iron. And so I don't recommend doing it in there. I've heard it can also give it kind of a metallic taste. I've done it before and whatever, but stainless steel really is a great way to go for your pots and pans. Okay, I can feel the bottom is smooth. That means I've gotten up all of those browned, amazing bits. And now I'm going to just let that simmer down until it's almost all the liquid is gone, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is where we're starting. You can see there's quite a bit of liquid in there, and I'll show you where I go to. Another thing you may be wondering is timing. So often when we're trying to make dinner, we wonder when we should start one thing or another so that you don't have something done way before something else. The thing about this sauce is I've definitely used it where the moment I think it's done, I throw in some cooked noodles and we go. But like many other things, it gets better as it rests. And so if you are having a quiet morning at home or an early afternoon, your kids are down for a nap, or you're just already going to be at home, it's a great thing to make earlier in the day and then just let it sit. I'll let it sit for a couple of hours on the stove. It'll stay warm. I like to leave it for at least 20 to 30 minutes. And so I don't usually make my pasta until I feel like this is all done and ready. And then I let it sit Then I cook the pasta so that when the pasta is done, because pasta doesn't do well when it sits, right? Then I can throw it all together and we're good to go. But absolutely, it's better the next day. The kids always tell me that, you know, when they pour the sauce out, it's better because those flavors have melded with each other and got even better, and you know, so nothing's too much one way or the other. So if that stresses you out, don't worry. Just make it, throw it on your pasta and go. But if you're having kind of a quieter day at home, or you want to do it in the morning, you want to do it days before, like I said, and put it in the fridge, you can absolutely do that. And in fact, it'll be better. Okay, it's hard to tell over video, but almost so much of the liquid is gone. It's just mostly the vegetables with a little liquid in between them instead of more like soupy consistency. It's a lot thicker. So now it's time to add in our tomatoes. Not all canned tomatoes are created the same, but none of them are going to be that bad. It's just there's little differences. I mostly buy these because Costco sells them, but also they're a good brand. One of the things that I like is in between the whole tomatoes, it's a very thick sauce. A lot of whole tomatoes, it's more watery, but that's really nice and it's flavorful, it's yummy. So I'm gonna dump this in. Right now I have 3 cans. I might actually do 4. We'll just see. Now this is where your handy tool is gonna come in again, because you can just go down there and it's very satisfying to cut through those tomatoes. It feels really good. In the past, I did it with my hands. I would literally break them apart with my hands as I would pour a tomato at a time into my hands. I've also done it with an immersion blender, but I like them to be a little bit more textured than an immersion blender gives. And so this is the perfect way to do it for me. Yeah, I'm gonna add 1 more can. See, there's no rules here. You just kind of go with your gut. This is also when I'm gonna add in my tomato paste. This is definitely not the best tomato paste. It is fine, but there are some really incredible tomato paste out there, especially those ones in the tube. So much flavor in those. I think they're more concentrated. That would be very expensive. So I am going to just use the Costco branded tomato paste. Works for me. It's also time to add in our sausage back in, and it's still in large pieces. And so we're gonna use this tool once again to break it up. And like I said, depending on the texture that you like, you can either go all the way fine, you know, like if you're making a lasagna, or you can leave it a little chunkier. Maybe if you are having, you want it to be, you know, you're having more like a different pasta shape and you want kind of some texture in the sauce as well. That can be delicious. I will probably go somewhere in between. Just depends on how much I want to keep doing this. Okay, all of my mashing is done. I've got a semi-chunky sauce here. I'm going to let it simmer to cook the rest of the pork sausage, but also to just get all the flavors to come together. So I'm gonna let that just simmer on a lower simmer for a little bit so that we're not making a mess of the kitchen. There's a little bit of a mess already. And then we'll check back in. Okay, it's been simmering for a bit, and this can be where you are done and you're going to adjust your salt, your spices, your pepper, or you can do what I do and add in a bunch of cream, and it makes it very good. I mean, cream makes everything very good. Okay, so the cream is in. It's a beautiful color. Should I show you? Yummy, yummy. And this is where I'm going to want to adjust my spices, my seasonings, my salt, my pepper. I'm going to be adding in salt. You definitely want to add in salt because even though there is some natural saltiness to the tomatoes and the sausage, I guess you're going to add in salt to your liking, but you'll notice the more salt you add, I mean, there's a point where it's too much. But if it doesn't have enough salt, you can't really appreciate all the flavors that are in there. It just warms it up and makes it taste so much richer. Also, not all salts are the same, so I'm using a sea salt, which is not as salty. Perfect. Definitely some black pepper. Pepper is actually a flavor enhancer. Salt tastes good, but like scientifically, pepper does make flavors more intense. So don't be afraid to use some pepper in there. I didn't do that much, we'll see. And then you can add fresh herbs at this point, especially if it's summer and you've got a ton of fresh basil or oregano. You can add your dry herbs when you're sauteing, at the end of sauteing when you put the garlic in. But I like to add them at the end because if you cook them the whole time, it mellows their flavor quite a bit. And I'm looking for a brightness. I've said that in cooking videos before and people don't know what I'm talking about. A bright flavor would be something like lemon, in contrast to something savory and deep like a cooked mushroom. I just put in some oregano and I have some basil. So I always want to make sure that I've added something bright to my foods, and I want my spices to be bright at the end so that you feel them at the top of your mouth and like, and you might find that you didn't know about that. So you adding a little bit of lemon to your soup or some vinegar. A little bit more basil. It's very delicious. And then I think we'll be done. I might put in a little bit more pepper, but I won't make you guys watch me do that. Another nice thing about being a home cook is I can use the same tasting spoon the whole time. Yum, yum. That's good. So now I'm gonna put a lid on this. I'm gonna let it sit, and I have started my pasta. The water's on here heating up, and then I'm gonna throw it all together. I'll check back with you after dinner when I'm putting it away and storing it for later. All right, guys, it's a couple hours later. Dinner is over and cleaned up. It was delicious, and I made a lot because I got 5 quart size jars out of that. Are these a quart? I don't know, but I got 5. So that's awesome. I will probably put 2 in the fridge and 3 in the freezer. Maybe someday we'll can these in a pressure canner. Be awesome, but at this point, we'll go through it really quickly. The 3 I put in the freezer, if you just take them out the night before and move them to the fridge by the next evening, they are defrosted enough that you can just heat them up in the microwave by taking the lid off. Every time I make the sauce, like I said, because I'm a home cook, I can just do whatever I want, and it's a little bit different. And I'm assuming that the sauce that you make at home will be a little bit different too. I hope that you feel more equipped if you've never done it before, that you can make a sauce as simply as sauteing some garlic and adding the tomatoes and letting it cook. That in and of itself is delicious. All the way into getting creative, searching through your fridge and your spice rack to create something all your own. It's a great thing to learn. It's even greater to learn it so much that it's really easy to do and doesn't take a lot of effort, mentally at least. It's been really fun to grow older and to get better and better at working in the kitchen, and really fun to share it with my kids and now with all of you. So hope that you're having a good day, and definitely leave in the comments anything that you add that's extra special or makes your spaghetti sauce extra special. Till next time, bye.